Hello, you beautiful infinite beings, right onto your path of exploring the infinite, your infinite potential, your infinite truth, and ultimately your infinite self. Today I'm going to be talking about purpose alignment. What I mean by that is how can you align yourself energetically? How can you vibrate on the same frequency as your purpose, as your deepest calling, your generally just any sort of true deep aspirations and aims, goals and meaning that could all qualify as what you make sense of as your purpose. Now, to start this, I'd like to mention that people are generally of two types. One being pleasure based, or rather pleasure driven humans, and the other being purpose or meaning driven humans. And to explain that, pleasure driven people are intolerant of conflict and problems and would rather to just focus on pleasurable experiences and good feelings. And when it comes to a conflict or a problem, they tend to cope or escape using any sort of pleasures, entertainment, any sort of a coping mechanism that gets that dopamine and serotonin back in their system highly as they're used to match their normal feeling, because their normal feeling has been adapted to a very high level. So when it comes to any conflict and it drops, when it comes to any experience that makes that drop, they usually try to adapt with raising it by any sort of pleasure. And so one of the most befitting ways I've heard someone describe pleasure based, pleasure driven people is that they generally lead a miserable life in which they constantly fluctuate from anxious to depressed to feeling normal to usually just overwhelmed by emotional distress and by emotions, and are unable to focus on a clear goal and set standards and stick to them. And so they live in hopelessness and helplessness on the idea that they could be so much more, but they're unable to put in that energy to meet or express their full potential. Whether purpose or meaning driven people make plans and are able to stick to them, they're able to follow up to the end. Whether it ends in failure or success, that's not the point. It's just that when they when they're faced with conflicts or problems, they focus on their purpose, on their meaning, and they follow up. They're able to put in that effort. They're able to put in this commitment to a higher meaning they hold in their life, and they're able to stick to it. The thing about pleasure-based people is that they're not able to give up the pleasures in order to they also have the high values, they also have higher meanings, and they're aware of it, but they live in misery because they're unable to stick to it. And I believe that at some point each one of us has been there. We've all been there at that point where you know that you're worth more, that you can do more, but you're unable. Every time you try to start something, you crumble back. You feel overwhelmed and you feel just too stressed by the idea of putting in that effort, and you become anxious and you'd rather not, and you'd rather tend to other pleasurable experience. And so to distinctify, to rather simplify or break it down even further, I'd be focusing on two major differences between pleasure driven people and purpose driven people, those being commitment and devotion. And the power that these two hold is immense, to say the least. I'll start with devotion because honestly I believe that it holds more power, as it serves as the roots to many other things. It serves as the root to generally many things in life. And so devotion, an act of devotion in which you live mindful, you experience, you practice mindfulness, you practice putting other things higher than yourself, putting meanings and purposes higher than yourself. That is basically devotion. And I'm aware that it comes in infinite forms, but I don't want to specify, I don't want to make it specific here. I'm generally speaking of an act of devotion that is to wake up and know that you're intentionally practicing something in devotion, in offering, in serving, in belief, in faith. All of these things serve as devotion. You see, and the reason I think it holds more power in alignment and in getting you to your purpose, in making you vibrate on your purpose, is because it mainly works on energy. It mainly works being mindful, focusing on any singular point, calming your mind, and just trusting in the process and having faith and taking those leaps of faith. It takes you higher, it takes your energy higher, it makes you generally vibrate higher, not on any necessarily specific frequencies that you're aiming to attract and manifest in your life, but generally it raises your vibration, it raises your energy. And so what usually happens, for example, you could work, I have experienced this firsthand multiple times, when you could just work on achieving something over and over, not necessarily extremely hard, because then the power of commitment is gonna prove efficient, it's gonna prove success. But then where you would work on something and try to get something done in your life, whatever that experience, it could come in the form of a relationship, of love, of a job, a business, just a pleasurable experience even. But you wouldn't, no matter every time you put that amount of effort in trying to achieve it, it wouldn't come. But then at some point, when you're just being present and you're aligned with what you are at that moment, it will just be presented to you, it will just come to you in some sense, like a job offer out of nowhere, or just someone suggesting a business, and that the solution to your business out of nowhere, or that unexpected person that you go into a very meaningful relationship with. And whereas you did not put any effort, you were not at that point, you were not even looking for that, it just came because that's what you wanted, and maybe perhaps at some point you worked on it but you did not get it. But now when you've become mindful, when you've practiced an act of devotion, when it just comes to you. And this is, by the way, this is very noticeable, because usually people would think it's something that happens with no specific pattern to follow and just in a haphazard manner that you cannot trace back to, but you actually notice if you if you're consistent with your act of devotion, you can keep seeing that you're upgraded, that you're now aligned on these frequencies that you stopped trying even to attract into your life. And that's part of the thing, because once you stop being obsessed with having a specific thing, you give up that much of that resistance to what is the present. You give up lots of that resistance to that thing, because when you're, I believe, yes, as Abraham Hicks would say, that the more you're wishing for something, the more you're trying to get to some point, the more you're resonating with the fact of it not being there. And that makes you vibrate on the frequency, on the energy of it not being there. And so it will not come when you're trying that hard, when you're doing what you are doing in that manner. But when you let go, and this is part of it, but generally speaking, the act of devotion includes, heavily relies on being present. And by being present, you become grateful, you become devoted to life, you become devoted to a higher purpose, a meaning in life. You're just, many examples of this would be prayer, would be a connection to a higher, to your higher self, to your infinite self, to whatever infinite divine source you devote that energy to. And meditation and yoga, prayer, all of these are forms of. And so when you are devoted, when you have a mindful present act of devotion, you vibrate on all of these higher energies. And what you are trying to attract is most probably of a higher nature of energy than yours at the current moment. And that's why it's not quite yet manifested into your life. It could have been, the process of attraction could have started much longer before that. And so devotion gets you things, gets you, it aligns you with your higher purpose, because you're aligned with higher feelings, you're aligned with higher things in general. You're putting trust in higher divinity, in the universe, in your energy, in your essence. You're just choosing trust and believe. And that's how it gets you aligned with your purpose. However, commitment, the power of habit, there's commitment could be broken into two parts, which is the power of habit and the commitment energy itself. Because the more you work towards something, if you're committed to working on, if you know that in order to achieve your aspiration, in order to get closer to get to your purpose, you need to put this amount of work in this manner, for example, in whatever manner. So when you're committed to this and you're continuously working on that, it gets you aligned. Because the more you work on something, the more you feel it, the more you see yourself able to actually work on that thing, the more your energy becomes aligned with what is that thing is going to lead to. And that's why the commitment holds its own energy, vibrating energy that vibrates on the end result, let's say. But it's also important to not focus too much on the end result, to not become reward driven or result driven, and rather forget about the present, the journey that actually plays the major role in you getting to the end point. If you get caught up too much on the end result, on the reward, then perhaps you could be even become overly practically or materially purpose driven, and that's not even a good thing. That even is not a good thing. There should be a balance. You should also learn to let go of the result, to let go of the pleasure at the end, and live at the pleasure of the moment, because every moment could be pleasurable. We just need to lower our expectation, our standard of dopamine, our egoistic needs, our ego. We just need to silence our ego for a bit, because it keeps asking for more. It's always more and more, because that's how it makes sense out of anything. When it feels bad, when it feels threatened, it's when it's attacked, when it's faced by low dopamine experiences, when it's faced by a conflict, it feels threatened and it cowers back, and it pulls you with it. But when you draw the line between the ego and your spirit, your essence, you're more able to control that. And so you'd also have to be careful not to get too success driven and purpose driven in a way that becomes toxic, in a way that makes you forget about what you're working at, and you perhaps even you could become pragmatic or in the process. Or that's not what I'm trying to say here. You also need to take care of your pleasures and your rewards, but you cannot let it revolve. What makes you revolve around, what you cannot let it be the thing that controls your daily emotional and nervous system reactions. And so when you're committed, there's the energetic alignment, the energetic resonance that gets you to your purpose, gets you closer to your purpose. And then there's the power of habit. When you're committed to this thing and you're continuously working on achieving that thing, you build a habit. And with the habit, the power of habit is probably known to all of us. They like psychologically, if you maintain a habit for 21 days, it is good as permanent if you maintain your value and your belief in that thing. However, even a week of commitment, of habit, a week or 10 days of building a habit, of maintaining a habit, it could make it for good if you decide to. And what you do by building a habit is that you're always able to do the things required for you to get to that purpose, to that calling, because it becomes part of you. And so it's not that you're gonna lag and procrastinate, and when it's a habit, then it's a habit. It's there every day, it's there whenever you want it to be there. There's not gonna be a fight against habit, against your pleasures, that you're driven by pleasure, because you're gonna be, when it's a habit, it even surpasses your pleasures, and it even becomes a pleasure. That's how it becomes a habit, I believe. And so with this, I hope you're able to get closer to your purpose. I hope you're able to see how close it actually is if you just shift your perspective, shift your focus. If you're just able to give up a few things and devote and commit yourself to some point, to something, you will eventually get there. Even if you're not committed to that thing that you deeply need, your devotion and your commitment will get it to you without you even trying. And so I hope that you got something out of this video, and if you liked it, please subscribe, because there's much more coming. Thank you and have a very good day.